Hello.
Hi, Beam.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
I'm in the right place.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
It's a bit of a challenge these days, but I hope we are getting out of. We are trying to align everything to the new meeting invite, but it has been a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Fingers crossed.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, there is still the old invite, I think, at the moment, which you should actually delete. I think that's the way to do it.
Let me log in over there too. And,
Okay, yeah, indeed. Oh, sorry, good point.
Yeah, I did that last week. I logged in over there too to tell people, hey, leave.
So I think there's a way to actually set reminder in Slack channel. Maybe we should actually go ahead and put this, create a reminder for the SIG Automation channel.
Yeah.
Put the link to it. That will probably make it easier.
Okay, I'll do.
I was just looking it up about a few minutes back, but I couldn't get to it. I got sidetracked. But maybe that is something, trying to make it easy for the folks on, at least on the Slack channel, to see that reminder pop up.
Yeah. The meeting, because now the invitation are no longer personal, right?
Yeah. I'm signing in. I'm going to see if it's still on the calendar in the OpenDev tool, because I can't seem to find my personal invitation anymore.
Yeah, I updated from the calendar, and it still took the old link, so I have the new. I went back through the Slack to find this link.
So this is the same meeting link even for both the Tuesdays and Thursdays and the Wednesdays, right?
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Oh yeah, I know.
We'd have to use Nephew fan out to achieve that.
But I hope everybody has received the calendar invite now officially through the email channel, because John fixed that.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, because I sent out. Yeah, me too. I got it, but it would be good just to confirm if this is fine. But it seemed, I have the feeling this worked. Do you want me to share the agenda, John?
Oh, yeah, I'm fine. Why don't you go ahead? I'm trying to get this other thing set up. Go ahead. And I think please go ahead.
Yeah, the calendar for yesterday being worked. Yeah, I got that from the system. The appointment worked.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Hey team, I just want to let you know, because I was on another Zoom bridge that was in my calendar, and I know some other people were in that bridge as well. Probably 8 of them.
To redirect them.
Okay, thank you. Because I've seen your message, Wim, on the Slack, but I guess people, maybe someone should join and let people know over there.
Yeah, John is doing that, I think, right? Yeah, we have this bit of a problem still.
So just from my understanding, going forward for Tuesday and Wednesday, we will be having a new invite, is it? The old invites won't work?
Correct, yeah. I mean, the old invites will still work, but we are not joining that meeting typically, so we are trying to redirect people to this meeting.
I see. For this one, were we supposed to get an email? At least I did not get the email.
Okay, but that should have gotten out 2 weeks ago, John, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I see.
So yeah, John, I didn't put anything new on the agenda or new on the agenda.
Okay,
Yesterday
you're still working on the use cases, right? So I figured we just continue to go through them. Or,
yeah.
Yesterday we had a discussion with.
Yeah, we had a discussion with on the CRDs, right? I had an offline conversation with Steven after that. So we have been updating. So we are merging the two proposals together in Steven's document. So there will be only one document. I just updated the introduction side of things. I don't know what was everybody in. Do we want to recap what we discussed yesterday a little bit, or because I have the feeling that there is people who on this info model, it might be important to recap a little bit or not, because there was some discussion on this information model. We are doing some CRD designs, and maybe it's worth going through that a little bit, or we want to go purely on the use cases right now?
Yeah, a bit of bit of brief would definitely help, Wim. Yeah.
Okay. I'll open the document that I don't know, is Steven on the call? No. Okay. So I'll open the document that we are merging, but it's not yet done or not yet complete. I'll open it like this. It's probably easier. So the main discussion is on the, let's say, first of all, maybe just to recap, is that we defined a set of roles, right? At the moment, okay, I added vendor because so there is a vendor who delivers software, right? And software plus some artifacts that go with it on how to deploy it. Then we have what we call the network designers. So these are the people who are basically, they are not going to the nitty-gritty details, but they're basically defining on how those network functions, we call them the network function sets, right? So it can be one, but it can be a set because we have this fan out option. So you should look at this as there can be multiple UPF sets that fan out to multiple clusters or to a single cluster. That depends on how you define it, as well as AMF and SMF. So basically you have a set of network functions that are defined there, and then one of the discussion which we'll go into is we also, or at least I was advocating that we also define on how we interconnect them. So in the POC we did that. So I would like to basically, what we did in the POC, refactor it a little bit, that we can have the same, that we can achieve the same thing. And then there is a third role, which is what we call the, and in the meantime, I added this network function / infra deployment engineer. So these are the people that I take the input here and basically I look at IP addresses, VLANs, and so on and so forth. So these are the roles that we are defining right now. In my proposal, when I did is I split it, the network function, deployment engineer, and infra. But at the moment, so I don't know whether there is strong opinions around that. So whether we have to split that or not, because I believe in reality, there is a difference between the person that deploys or operates or defines how a network function would be used versus the people owning the infrastructure and the cluster and stuff like that. In some cases, the same person, in some cases, different people. So,
yeah,
so at the moment, yeah.
Generally, I mean, to your point, Pim, yeah, I think I've seen infrastructure, at least working with two.
Separated?
I mean, but I had experience of working with two telecom providers in the US and one in Europe. Especially in the US, one had a little bit closer interactions in my previous job. Yeah, the infrastructure is always, it's a separate team.
Yeah, that's also my experience. It's not always, but it's most of the time separated. So we will see how to deal with that. At the moment, it's maybe not as relevant for the release 1, but it will be more relevant going forward, I think, because one of the thoughts is that we want to deploy or define the CRDs in a way that they, or there would be a CR or CRD that is particularly owned by a specific role, right? So as such, we wanted to split the information model in such a way that they would be consumed on a per role, on that role basis. That's one of the, let's say, assumptions that we are making. Okay, so that's that. Then
one comment, Wim. I mean, when you say network designer, are you intending? You said they are actually network function designers or service designers, right? I mean, they are the people who's going to kind of have an idea of how basically a 5G say core slice and the kind of workloads it's going to handle, or the kind of users that it's going to handle, and so on. So I'm just, so is it, you mean network function designers? Is that, or because it seems to be when you read it, network designers and network deployment engineers, I mean, they seem to be more focused on the network, not on the service. I'm assuming you meant service.
That's correct, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
so I think in my terminology, I call this the network service design.
Mm-hmm.
And this is more I call them the, let's say, infra engineers, right? Or network function engineers, right? So, but okay, I just use the terminology that Stephen has. We can, of course, debate the naming, right? But I think, I think I think mentally how we have to consider or look at this is these are the people more looking at it from a, let's say, a high level point of view. So this is what I want to achieve. And these are the people who are going into the nitty-gritty details on how it should be assembled. So like, we will not discuss VLANs at this level, or IPs or BGP. We discuss it at this level. I think that's how we mentally have to look at this.
Yeah. No, I was just saying that role, probably it's better to call it network service designers.
This one? This one?
Otherwise,
yeah, that's also what
I agree. Yeah. Yeah, I have the same comment which Ravi just stated. I mean, to have a clear demarcation between the network service designer, which is more focused on the network function, the application deployment, right? And then the infra deployment engineer, who is, like you said, Pim, more towards provisioning the cloud infrastructure and other underlying resources, right? Including the networking aspects. And the one which you have highlighted as a text, and so that that's not the part of the R1 scope, right? This is what we are assuming, that it all be pre-configured, and
we are doing a pieces of it. For example, if you look to the POC, what we did, so for example, IP address allocation, right, was part of the POC, because, okay, this is, I think, yesterday, part of the discussion was related to, we have different ways of achieving that. I think so far, and I think John has been mainly advocating that, is we were focused on the shift left approach, meaning, and I'm also an advocate of that, is that we try everything we can do in the management cluster, we want to do in the management cluster. And there will be things that we have to do at the workload cluster. For example, scale out. Most likely when you see like a CPU spike and you have to scale out, probably these are things that has to happen on the workload cluster because you want to be independent. But I think so far we are trying to design as much as possible shift left as we can. And as a result of that, in the current scope, and maybe that's a good conversation to have, because I'm trying to do as much as possible shift left. So meaning that the IP addresses that we needed for the network function were actually allocated in the management cluster. And as a result, they are delivered through the package and then applied locally onto it. So basically, even the network attachment definition were defined or hydrated at the management cluster, and they were just implemented at the workload cluster and the IPs and stuff like that were already pre-allocated. And I think yesterday with Tal, this was one of the discussions in my view is which model do we go for? At the moment, I've been focused more on the shift left approach to do as much as possible on the management cluster. But also this is good.
This is, I believe, this is where we have like the demarcation point. I mean, there are other components that they actually generate the network attachment definition down in the workload cluster directly.
Sure.
So, I mean, from my view, we need to have like a pluggable approach on the management classes, so we can actually accommodate both implementations.
100%, yeah. 100%, yeah. But I think what I'm trying to say is that for at least one, we probably don't have all the flexibility that we want. And so as a result, I'm of the opinion we probably have to pick one to start, but make sure that it's flexible enough that we can do other alternatives.
Yeah, I would say that the standard shift right approach is already something we can do, right? We can already deliver resources to the workload cluster. So the shift right approach, or the normal operator heavy approach, or whatever you want to call it, that sounds a little pejorative, which it's not intended to, but the typical approach that people have used traditionally, you know, where things are allocated on the workload cluster, all you have to do to accomplish that from a nephew point of view is deliver a resource to an operator. So we already can do that. So that's why there's a lot of discussion and emphasis on, well, okay, that's great, and that's important, and we'll need to do that in many cases. But there are other things that we want to demonstrate or come up with new techniques to do these things in the management cluster. And so that's kind of why there's a lot of focus on that. But I totally agree that there will be many things, including in some cases network attachments, in some cases IPAM, in some cases you know, all kinds of things done in different circumstances in the workload cluster too.
I see that people are raising their hands, but I don't see who. So
me. Hi.
I think Tao is going.
Yeah. Oh, is it somebody else? I didn't see him. But yeah, I just want to comment. Yeah, it's true that we're not forbidding things happening at the workload cluster, but we're not demonstrating any of that. And you know, there has been a lot of talk about things that we show. So R1 will not show it.
It's actually not true, Tal. If you go to the workshop thing, there's a operator. The first thing we do is deploy an operator. And then the second thing we do is deploy resources, including a CR that operator processes on the workload cluster to generate the deployment and the config map configuration for the particular UPF workload. So we could add in there, like if we feel it's necessary, if we want to demonstrate both and we have the resources, I think we should demonstrate NADs being generated on both sides, perhaps. But
I would like that to happen, right? Because yeah, we're not demonstrating that. Sure, we're showing that there is an operator, but it's not doing anything particularly interesting for NFV right now. So I mean, we had a few presentations.
The config file for the particular network function, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Right, but it's not doing netconf. It's not doing any of the kind of right.
I'd love that netconf. That'd be awesome. Yeah.
So it is possible, you know. I have a POC. We have Demetrius who worked on ENO. I mean, we do have components that we could potentially plug in. Again, R1, the scope for R1, we're very conservative about adding and showcasing more features. But if we decide together to try, at least we could.
But do we have a priority? Is shift left our priority? That's what I'm sensing.
That's the question for the whole community. I mean,
yeah, correct. So that's why I'm asking it. Yeah, do we go shift left first and then shift right second, or because we probably have to prioritize?
I mean, from implementation perspective, like for R1, maybe we can go with whatever community decides. But at least from a drawing point of view, like in a diagram, we can at least show both cases, so we know that at least this is on the map, and this is what we are targeting also from implementation perspective.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, because I think we have a limitation, right, which is the deadline for R1. So I would love to do all of it, to be honest, but we probably have to make some priority calls, and then but okay, we should probably move that to the poll on the Slack, right? Is whether we go shift left first and then shift right. Is that the way forward, or do we vote here?
Well, the Google seed code is very shift left focused. So
yes, yeah.
That's where we're starting with. But I do think that there are quite a lot of people who are passionate about showcasing the other. I think an issue here is that R1 will be, for many people in the industry, the first real look at Nefio. I mean, they heard about it, they know that it's going on, but the R1 release, in terms of a press release, will say, okay, here's Nefio, they built something. Sure. So I think the features we showcase will give an important initial look at what Nefio is capable of. So I am concerned that if we're really focused on shift left, people will think that this is all that Nefio is about.
I think we'll have some pieces that demonstrate the other, but like let's take that towards the plan. Like, so there's a planning document. If people can contribute to that and add that as a thing in the plan as a stretch goal. I have other stretch goals in mind around cluster provisioning and things like that I'm not telling anybody about because I don't want to promise anything to any other SIGs. I mean, I tell you all, but even though they're the same people, but I expect you to wear different hats. I don't know, we'll get to those. We're trying to keep the scope something we can deliver. That can be definitely a stretch goal where we run an operator, or something down there, or your thing Tal that does the NADs and deliver some resources to it. But like, let's not make that, let's not divert focus too much from delivering the overall picture.
All true. We'll have to decide together what we can fit in or not. I also think the plan could evolve a little bit. The stretch goals, at the end of the day, everybody here will work on what they're passionate about. And if somebody really wants to work on that component, we'll definitely not stop them, right? If they don't want to do something else.
It's open source,
Exactly, yeah. I'm not providing a plan or suggestion here. I'm just pointing out that a lot of us do think it's an important thing to showcase, and we would be happy if it would be more showcased in R1, but it's up to us. It's up to us.
Okay. So, by the way, is there any strong opinion? I think for release 1, we keep them combined, right? And we can see for going forward whether we need to split or not. Is that somehow the feeling I'm getting?
I don't know. What I heard from other people was that those should be split, and I'm kind of on the same mind. Okay. I think that it'll come down to the modeling, right? You and Stephen are proposing some CRDs. Like,
so we have we have not split the CRDs. I started to build a diagram on it, but we discussed yesterday, pretty long after the call. And so this is what we are proposing. So basically this should be network service designer in the meantime, is that we kind of have basically, there is 4 parts. That is the classes that define or have a reference to the specifics of the vendor. There is the instance sets that define the network functions and the characteristics on how they should be consumed. There will be networks on how they are attached, and there will be attachment how network functions connect to the network side. That's what we discussed after the call. So we
and then network probably goes to infrastructure. So we have a new class of users probably.
So that's why we have to split probably.
Okay, and then I'm sorry, Arvind has his hand up. I won't jump the line here. Arvind.
Go ahead, Arvind. I guess.
I think you're on mute or something. We can't hear you. I can't anyway. Okay, well, he figures that out. I will. Stephen and I talked yesterday after he talked, Wim, and one thing we discussed, and I wanted to sort of clarify if you're on the same page. So, to me, when we talk about like network, right, there's, well, one aspect is this network concept here lives in the management cluster and is sort of global. When you go down to the workload clusters, it's probably going to break down into smaller segments.
Correct.
So it's a name. Effectively, it's a name. And I'm imagining that as like a layer 3 address space. So like basically a routing table, right? Like, and maybe at the workload cluster, it's implemented in some cases as a VLAN with a subnet, and in other cases something else, and then maybe there's BGP, but we don't talk about any of that here. We just talk about it as a network as a sort of name. Is that how you're envisioning it as well? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. So actually, there is a PR on the Ansible playbook that basically does this. I use the constructs that we have in the POC, but so what basically I can actually show you very quick. Where is
Okay. Well, the other thing I was going to say is so that's from the consumption side. So that's like as a network service designer, I want to attach to networks. All I really need to know about it is its name, and maybe there's a IPv associated, maybe there isn't, right? At this global
correct
level.
That's correct.
Okay, awesome. And then there's a whole nother aspect of provisioning those networks throughout the world, and that's am I right that that's what we would call transport, and that's out of scope for R1?
Correct. So, and at the moment, this is done through the Ansible playbook, sets up the network, and we just consume it. That's all that happens. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page for what the different things we're trying to express. Eventually, we'll have a network expression. I mean, I think some community members have expressed interest in transport side. So eventually, in theory, we would have a way to provision those and use upstream projects to provision them. But regardless, we're going to define at the consumption layer, a specific CRD for consumption, and those provisioning aspects can be done separately.
For example, in my view, this and this would be consumed by ENO, for example, eventually.
To
implement.
Say again, sorry, because I was not following the last.
These will be consumed by ENO. So here is my mentally.
The attachment, the network attachment definition gets created by ENO. They're not consumed by ENO.
No, but this is not a network attachment. This is not a network attachment definition. This is basically an input to deliver a network attachment definition. Same here. So that's why I'm saying is that this is an input that ENO will basically detail out and figure out the exact config on the network device and on the network attachment definition.
So combine this with information that comes from a different source.
But that's actually that's actually the northbound of ENO. I mean, ENO also expects some parts to be coming from the north, and that will be converted and created in a manifest for the NAT.
Yes, but my point is this, right? I want to be really clear. My point is this: is that I want, from a Nefio point of view, the information we need to consume out of network and attachment as workload function deployment controller to be very clearly segregated from the northbound for whatever provisioning platform we're using for provisioning that. So when I say clearly segregated, I mean probably separate resources, maybe associated in some way via a reference or something like that. But the point is that I don't want to build a dependency between Nefio and any particular provisioning platform. It's the same thing I want to do with clusters and everything else, right? And with vendors on network functions. Let's keep very clear what our automations need to consume, keep those very clearly segregated from what other automations need to consume in order to provision the same things. They're different.
Yeah, but one comment, if I may, the network attachment definitions, I see them more specific to per application basis. So what are the benefits that we are getting in shifting the NAT creation in the left? I mean, in the management cluster.
So Dimitri, this is not network attachment definition, by the way. This comes after, right? So this is back to the shift left for the shift right approach. There is deployments where, for example, what we do in the POC at the moment, everything is known upfront in the management cluster. So we could define the NADs. There will be other scenarios where we cannot. So in other words, it has to come at the workload cluster. And we will have both of these scenarios supported in Nefio, right? But there is a capability. For example, I know of two operators that basically says, here is my max scale, deploy it like that. Everything hard code, figure out everything in front of during let's say, commissioning, and that's it. And okay, they will do scale out and scale out locally, but everything is predefined from the management side when that deployment happens. And I believe there is different ways on how people consume the system. And I believe we in Nefio should be able to support both of them.
Absolutely.
I mean, let's take the Eno example, okay, just to understand the shift right approach. So in Eno, like the northbound API, it has a subnet CR and it has an L2 service attachment CR, okay? Yes. So this has to come from the management cluster down to the workloads cluster, so Eno can actually produce the network attachment definition after that, okay? Yes. So there's two ways to actually do that. First is to actually by the Nefio component generate those exact CRs for Eno, right? Or you have like a more generic CR somewhere, and you have an operator, an injector controller, how you say that in the Nefio management cluster, that actually produces those CRs that are customized for Eno. So like an Eno injector. Maybe we can call it
will be more
I mean, I'm good with both of those approaches. I don't mind, but we need something like this. This is what I'm trying to.
Totally,
100%.
Yeah,
and I think it's more the second than the first. I think because we want to build it generically that we can plug in ENO. Maybe there is other transport solutions that we can flexible. So it's more the second than the first, probably.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so
confusing. Well, no, I won't. Let's just go on.
So one question. Sorry. So here we are talking about network service designer, right? On the left side.
Yes, yeah, it's not updated yet, but I will update
that's
it.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
that was not my point. I just wanted to ask one question about how granular we need to get here. I mean, here we are talking about the entire service. Here we are talking about 5G core. It could be 10 other different 5G core
radio.
The microservices that is defined, right? So in a telecom service provider, I know there is obviously this end-to-end service that we are defining here, but would the individual teams be responsible for one service? For example, can we say that one team is only responsible for SMF and AMF? They're done by two different teams, and then there is an architecture team that is chaining or putting them together is the service. So if that's the case, I'm just thinking loud here. I think our model here still works. I just want to make sure that that understanding is correct.
Yeah, so these are more the architects here, and here it's more the network function. But as you said, right, there is no, so we call them out. There is network function deployment engineer, and let's say that is infra. There is nothing stopping us to say there is a separate NF for SMF, another one for AMF, another one for UPF, another one for radio and stuff like that. So that's possible, right?
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's possible. I just want to make sure that my understanding is correct. So it is irrespective of how internal particular service provider wants to use this, wants to realize this end-to-end function. I think our CRDs should be, I think my understanding that it should be able to support.
Yes. Yeah. But we clearly have a split between this is more, let's say, the high level definition. And here we don't want to talk about VLANs or IP addresses and what have you, right? That's happening at this level. So that's the split that we are making. So this is more architecture, and this is more these know the SMF and UPF inside out. These guys say, hey, I want them. And this is the high level requirements. And these are the guys who know the nitty-gritty details on how they would be consumed.
Got it. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
So that's how far we are at the moment. So I don't know. That's a little bit, let's say, the mental model behind the framework. So should we go back to our use case document? So we have to update this document, by the way. So I'll work on that with Steven. and we'll submit definitely before the end of the week an update here. Okay. If not, then I think, wait, so what was I doing? Yeah, I always have a problem. I have too many tabs open. So I think the bigger discussion we wanted to have, because we promised that actually next week we would basically, yeah, I think I need to open that differently. Sorry. I'm not yet a good citizen. Yeah. So basically, my understanding is that I start to get a good handle on how to do user story 1, right? I think the other part of the discussion was to start focusing on user story 2. And I think there are actually 2 use cases in here. One is basically deploying a new UPF on a new cluster, which I think, so the discussion we wanted to have is detailing out the components that we need, first of all, I discuss how we would do it, and then see what are we missing to basically accomplish that. In this document at the moment, but this will move to John's document, these are the actions that we have open for the user story 1, right? Yeah, so basically this I think is covered. So these are the open actions. But this will move into John's document, where we basically combine all of this as a single planning file eventually, right?
If your name's on there, please just go into the document and add stuff. If you don't have add, you'll at least have suggest. I'll put it in the chat, the link to the document. But if you don't have add, we can edit, we can give it to you, but it just, anyway, the permissions are weird. But yeah, it's a community document we should all be building together, not my document.
Yeah. Okay, so then user story 2. So basically, maybe setting up the new edge cluster and deploying a UPF. Okay, we are not probably going to, it's a stretch goal, I think you said, John, for deploying a cluster. But we could always add a CRD into, or a CR in the, we have a cluster CR at the moment. So we should probably add that. And then do we update the network function, so the instance set, or do we just have the controllers automatically reconcile and figure out that there is a new edge cluster and the UPF gets deployed, or how do we want to do this?
So upgrading the capacity, I think this
is a separate one. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, the first one, upgrade the resource CPU memory of an existing UPF. So that is going to be, you update the NF instance set or wherever or it's in there's different pathways. So we can imagine, I want to remember, and I haven't looked at all the new CRD design, but assuming it's something like what we did in the past, there's some capacity requirements that are capacity specifications around sort of like throughput and things like that, or in terms of what a UPF or whatever it is, we want to measure from the outside, not from the inside. And those, so the question here is, when we say upgrade capacity, we said CPU memory, should that instead be upgrading the capacity requirements from the outside? So like, oh, we need more out of this UPF, not,
yeah, so the CLD doesn't even have CPU memory for you to input. So if you want to upgrade capacity of UPF, it's the capacity of UPF. So throughputs and stuff like that, not like CPU memory.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the idea being that, right, we don't know from the outside how that particular vendor needs to reconfigure their network function in order to meet those requirements. Could be memory, could be CPU, could be replicas, right? There could be different ways to increase the capacity from demand from the outside world. So then, that said, we're likely going to be changing that, and then something else, either an operator that manages that particular network function, or a controller or kept function that changes based upon those inputs, the resource requirements for individual deployments. So that would be actually a vendor-specific thing, and we've already had a lot of discussion on left shift versus right shift, and it's going to be up to essentially the vendor which way they do it. So for us in Free5GC, I don't know the answer to that. My expectation is, and we can maybe decide it later in our planning document, but that it's probably just increasing CPU or memory or replicas. I don't know if Stephen or somebody else who knows Free5GC well could say. Let's not talk about that maybe right now, because there's another point we need to make from the high level. Okay, so there's update the CR capacity. That should then imply and ripple through the whole system, every instance of that UPF across every workload cluster. If that capacity is on a instance set, which, if I understand what an instance set is, would be implied on all of them. So that's invariant. That capacity requirement is invariant across all the instances across all clusters, is one a way to do it. Now, there's another situation that might come up in real life, which is this particular instance needs an increased capacity. So now we have to decide on how we either model that such that we're not specifying it for everything, the whole set, or the one for the whole set is a default and there's an override available. The other option is in the model we have right now, where we have what we call a where we have a fully wet model, where we keep every single instance of the UPF has an individual Git a representation. We can actually go in and just change it in that one place if we need to. So these are all different ways we could do it, and they handle different real world scenarios. So we probably need to kind of delineate all of these ways and sort of catalog them and the approach we would take in each of them, and decide sort of what our recommendation is, what we want to support. But that's how I see it.
Yeah. There is another option potentially, John, which is bottoms up, right? I don't know how flexible or the watcher is that Google is going to give, but we could also increase the load at the workload cluster, get a notification. I don't know whether we have that capability in release 1. And then
No, I don't think that's a release 1 thing, unfortunately.
Okay.
So what we're talking about is like closed loop. Like ideally, what we do is we see a notification that we're reaching capacity limits, and either we auto scale locally the workload cluster if we have sufficient flexibility in our resources to do that, or we send a signal back somehow. And this is why I say somehow, because it's not even in R1. But if you go back to the very old diagrams, there's an analytics service and a closed loop service. And that's what that's for. But I don't think we'll get there in R1.
Okay, I'll put it. I just document because this is So I document that it's out of scope. Yeah. So Tal, I think I see your hand raised.
Yeah. So this is normally handled in orchestrators using policies, right? So the shift left part, right, is defining the policies, right? What to do when to scale based on which properties, and you know. There is no policy engine in Kubernetes, right? So there are many, there's OPA, there are other things, open source things that we could potentially use. It's a whole discussion, right, that we've never really discussed in the Nepio community.
Can I pause you there? Because in my mind, that's another level on top of this that's also out of scope for R1. Like, I'm not talking about, my understanding of this user story, and we can disagree, is that I just want to show something much simpler. I want to show the process for how we actuate a configuration change, regardless of how the decision to make that
Let me finish my thought, maybe.
Okay.
So yeah, I absolutely agree with that, right? But it's in the same way when we had discussions about network service orchestration, right? It's out of scope for us, but we're assuming that there's something above us that will do that. So we are assuming that there is a policy engine somewhere. So that means that what we have to do is find a way to interact with it, right? So if we can demonstrate that, you know, I see questions in the comments. You know, Eric is asking, what is the point? What are we trying to demonstrate? I think it's that, demonstrating that we could apply policies. We're not going to define them here, right? But if we can show that there are some properties, right, a demo policy or something like that, to show that we can apply it at the level of the workload cluster.
I think what we're trying to demonstrate is that we can do day 2 changes in a declarative manner, right? So across a fleet. So
exactly. The question is where the declarations are from, right? Going back to shift right versus shift left, right? Scalability happens at the edge, but it happens according to policy. So the declaration is the policy, but the action within that policy happens on the right side. So I think if we have that model in mind, then yeah, we can ignore the policy side, but we can focus on the implementation side.
Yeah, I would put it like that. It's not really option 3, basically. It's basically policy layer, which is out of scope, right? So, but I think what are we missing? I think, John, for instance, if we increase the capacity at the moment, I think, Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, it's in the class, right? So we basically update it. So we have to open the package and then it will have to ripple through. So probably this we have. This is a bit, here we need something, right?
So I think
it's the thing that so a class is used by many instances. So it's something we want to demo is change one class and trickle down to all the instances and all of them get upgraded.
So that's one way. Like I think that there's actually 3 levels. There's class. There's which is sort of a global thing. Then there's whether we allow people to configure it on a set of a given network function across a set of clusters. And then the 3rd level is whether we let people configure it on a specific instance on a specific cluster. And what the relationship is between those 3 different values. If you set all 3 of those values, it would seem like it's a hierarchical thing where we start out with the class, but you could override it in an individual set where you're defining it across a sweep of clusters, and then you could override it again on an individual cluster level. That would seem to be the most flexible. And if that's what we need to do, that's what we need to do, but we need to make sure it's in the model. Tal, your hand is still up. I think it might be from before, but Istvan's hand is up.
Okay, so if the instance set actually creates these 4 deployment cap packages that I think it should, then basically we have the chance to change the capacity either in the UPF deployment CRD that was given to the instance set, and that would affect all of the elements of all of the instances in the set, or for each and every particular instance, we also have a capped packaging Git that we can individually change. Mm-hmm. So basically, it is the question of, are we changing the parameter before fan out or after fan out? And both of that is possible in the current model.
Yes, agreed. And can I ask a question about the set? The set, as you've described it, because I haven't gotten a chance to go read the document, and probably other people on the call haven't as well. So there's 2 different dimensions. We can talk about it. Well, there's 2 different things that a set could mean, and I'm not sure which it is. Is a set here that thing I talked about representing an individual collection of the same network function across a bunch of clusters, or is it a collection of disparate network functions or a topology or constellation?
Okay. So first of all, it's a discussion starter, so we can discuss. But of course, I have a view in the document, and in my view, all of the elements of an instance set are of the same kind. So all of them are UPFs and SMFs, but you may have multiple instance sets of UPFs. So you can have a separate instance set for UPFs in edge clouds and another instance set for UPFs in the central.
Okay, no, I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. And then that other thing is something different we're not talking about yet. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Bala?
Yeah, thanks. So this hierarchy you talked about, maybe the class may be two cores. If at all we had to choose a priority between instance set, class, and individual instance, probably I have a feeling that class may be too coarse grained.
I think this was also my view, Bala, is that the class today, the capacity I think is in the class as far as I know. I have the feeling its life cycle is different. So we have to potentially decouple it. So I think the action here, I think out of it is to see what it means to the class with capacity and how we model it probably, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the other thing we have to keep in mind is for example, let's say we support both the cases. I wanted to understand from John, the overriding, how does it actually happen? Let's say first I update just one instance of UPF. Say I increase the CPU and memory. Let's say it is part of instance set A. And then tomorrow I go back and apply a different set of configurations for the instance set now, which is instance set A. Yes. It's totally different configuration. So obviously that is happening after I applied the changes to an individual instance. So would the second one take precedence?
This is a great question. So the way it should work, and I'm not sure it works all correctly yet, in my opinion, so fan out or variant generation contains essentially what you would think of as a default. And so when you create that set, you create 10 variants, then each instance will get the value from the set. Now later on, you go and change one of those instances. That's all fine, it's all working. Third step, you go and change the value in the set. What happens? This is your question. So the expected behavior from my point of view as a user would be that the set value takes precedent on all of the instances that contain the previous default value, the previous set value. But the one where I override it, I overrode it and I want my override to remain. So this is a problem we see kept in general as a problem we're trying to solve. And the approach we take, and like I said, I don't think it's quite working. I'm not entirely sure it works properly right now. We need to look at this. The idea is that because, and this is where we get down to, we're using a version control system. So we should be able to do the three-way merge such that we can see that a commit was done to override these values. So basically the way that the merge happens when you do an update to the set, and then that propagates updates to the variants, you have to do it through basically unrolling the commits, making the change at the commit level you originally proposed it in, and then reapplying those commits again. That's the approach that would preserve that default behavior. But I can't guarantee that it works properly right now for the variant generation case. This is how we do it if we have an upstream and a downstream, and we change the upstream, and then you do a kept merge, kept update. We do this unrolling and re-rolling thing, but the variant generation isn't using that engine in the same way, the package variant set stuff that we just created. So we might need to do more work to make it behave that way. So my first question to you, Bala, would be, does that behavior sound like what you would expect as a user or hope for? And then I guess that's my question.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks for explaining. I think my first impression is, should we ask the user the intent? Should we ask in such the way that when this change happened for an instance set, should we provide a field that says, should it override every individual things that he has done before? That may be the user's intent. Or should the individual changes that are done outside of this, should that preserve? I think it's very hard to interpret the user's intent here without asking the user, is where I'm thinking.
It's true. I'm trying to square that with two things.
Because
one is
intuitively, some user thinks I'm applying to the group. That means everything for the group this is what I want for the entire group. That's my intent. On the other side, somebody may be doing the actual mistake without realizing they made the individual things the previous day. So probably asking the user for the intent may be helpful.
But Bala, for that the shift left model is nice, right? Because you can basically you do a change before you apply it in the system or in the workload. You can actually validate whether you want to do so or not, right?
Yeah, I think this is a great question, and we should make sure that we capture it somewhere to sort it out. I think that we only have 4 minutes left. Stephen's got his hand up, and this is probably a half an hour discussion minimum. So Bala, can you make sure that you capture this somewhere? I don't know the right, there's maybe an issue in GitHub describing this. That we should try to push our things that we want to keep track of into GitHub. But it's a really good question.
Sure.
I'll give an action.
Yeah, let's put an action here, and then I'll put that. Thanks, John. I'll do that.
Stephen?
I would say this is a terribly written user story at this point. I have no idea who's making the decisions to upgrade capacity. Is it going to be a network architect, or is it going to be a deployment engineers responding to the fact that for my particular deployment in this particular cluster, my UPF seems to be running low on capacity, and I should be able to change it? In which case, that's different from saying a network architect saying, oh yeah, I'm predicting moving forward in a month, I need my New York deployment needs to actually be increasing capacity because end of the year is coming or something like that. So that's very different way of actually doing this. I mean, I could foresee people defining a different class and then move the current deployments into a different class and then making new entries into the instance sets and then trickles down, and then it makes an update. That should work perfectly fine. I could see, I mean, I much less something that I would recommend, but I could see deployment engineers change the UPF deployment directly. But then that's also capacity based on UPF. We don't give them hooks to change CPUs and memory by itself. And I don't know if the deployment engineers would do that directly because the automation platform is allowing the NF vendors to make that decisions. So how do I do 10 gig downlink capacity, and then if you upgrade that to 12, what is my response as an NF vendors? That's not even that's probably less of a, that's how we actually structure it right now. I'm not saying this is the right way, and just this is how we structure it right now. Because the operator, well, I mean, implementation difference, but then currently the FreeFileGC operator generates the deployment object.
Which is going to have
so CPU and memory is not even exposed, right?
Yeah, and I think that that's appropriate, right? I think that the users accepted a break glass kind of situation, and that's, we have to decide if that's something we need to do. Mm-hmm. Like the users, we've qualified as a vendor, you've qualified your network function to deliver this particular capacity with this particular configuration. Now, so how do you encode that, enforce that? You do it in an operator, that makes it something that the user can't change because it happens at runtime. There's nothing they can do about it. Well, they could if they wanted to get really sneaky and they put in some webhook, but of course then you're probably going to flap because you're going to continuously try and undo what the webhook is doing, and it's going to be a mess. But in general, the reason to put in an operator, we're having this left-right discussion. One of the reasons, from a point of view of a vendor, is so that the user can't change it. Now, that presupposes that the vendor knows everything up front that could possibly ever happen, and that is a really, really big assumption. So this is part of the debate. And you could put it, a vendor could put it in a kept function if they're using kept packaging, and then the user could still potentially override it, although you run into exactly the same problem we talked about earlier with whether the package variant overrides it. The function could forcibly overwrite whatever the user puts in there. So these are all tough questions to answer. We have to kind of figure out what our scope of control is going to be for the user versus the system, and who's gonna override and whether we need rules to control that, which is, I think, Vala's question.
Yeah. We are running out of time, I think, almost. You still have your, I think you just raised your hand.
Yeah. All of these discussions are wonderful, but I hate to sound like a broken record. It's expanding the possibility for R1 instead of narrowing it, the scope down.
So that's the other document, and like, let's get that. I mean, I said that we targeted 1 week from today to have a solid plan. That's not a lot of time to put a solid plan together. So this process is necessary, and we're going to have to iterate through all these user stories to get a solid plan. But let's at least get a plan 1 week from today to get user story 1 and whatever we've discovered so far done. So again, I will pick up your beating of your drum and drum it with you. Please, that's the point of the other document. I put it in the chat. I know it's very limited right now. I only put a few things in there. I'm really counting on this team to add to it. I'm going to add to it later this week. I have other things. Unfortunately, I have a deadline for other things that I have to get done. But later this week, I'm going to add more things to it. But I want this to be something we all do together. There's an introduction there that describes what I'm trying to do with the document. I'm also open to people saying that's insufficient, right? Please, everybody contribute. Tal's already put his name on there as well. I want to see authors' name. I want authors list at the top of that document. I want to see all 20 or 30 people on this call. I would love to see them all listed there. Like, let's make this thing happen. I really, really would appreciate that.
Just to follow up, really quick. We may have multiple scenarios per user story, right? And we have to pick 1 or 2 for R1, and then we'll defer the rest for post R1.
Right? It's going to be this. I think based on this discussion, this is going to be it, right? And whether we do, for instance, or that we can still define, I think. But
it doesn't mean we're shutting out option 2, for example, or flow, but we are saying that we're deferring it for post R1 so we can get R1 done. I'm sorry, I'm paranoid.
Yeah,
no, I agree. No, it's the right approach. Oh, come on, Tal.
Still hands straight.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'll just point one thing. I'm very much in favor of putting placeholders, right? So every time we have things that aren't in scope, we can put it as either comments in the code or documentation, or even a piece of code, right? That says, here's a type, and the comment says to do or something like that, and what should be there. Yeah. So again, think of R1 as showcasing to the world the intent of Nephio. So it's less about almost the implementation. Of course, those are important, but to show the pieces that would be there eventually. So to me, that's a very important part.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
By the way, if people have comments in the chat, because for me it's hard to follow, please edit in John's document if there is important points. John, I just use this as a note taker, but I'm going to put all this into John's document. So that would be the Bible for us. Okay.
Okay. Fantastic. Cool. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Is there a way to capture the meeting chat notes?
I have no idea, but I will ask.
I'm trying to copy and paste everybody. I'll copy and paste everybody comments. It doesn't work.
Yes. Because I'm afraid, see, that's my problem. It's hard to
I know.
To review during it. So that's why I'm saying is if there are things that we need to capture somehow, put them back.
Yeah, because chat goes away when you hang up, right? So
yeah, I'll stay alive.
Yeah, sorry.
No worries.
Almost there. Mostly I want to capture the comment with the link.
Yeah. I have for John's document. Yeah. I'll add that also to the agenda probably, right? So that's probably I'll add that in the agenda part.
Mm-hmm. Almost
so planning document, right? I call it.
Yeah. Almost done. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm slow this morning.
Because I use this agenda a bit as my guide. Is it 14?
I think I got it.
Yeah, if you don't mind sharing it, I would appreciate it. Otherwise, I have to do it again.
Sure. A second. I want to make it clean, so. Doesn't look like that many comments, but when you copy and paste, it's a lot.
Really?
Yeah, hold on.
And are we going in the right direction, Anne? Or
I think
still a lot of
so.
work to do?
I'm open to a lot of these discussions, but I keep hoping that we're like, okay, there are 3 options. We'll pick option 1 for R1, and then we'll do option 2 and 3 later.
Yes.
But people keep bringing in, like, I understand people wants to bring in, like, for example, E&O, right? But that opened up more work, more scope, and nobody's talking about paring it back to what's manageable for R1. And I've been in so many projects where if you don't do that, you end up in scope creep and not delivering.
No, for sure. But the way I look at it is the following, right? I mean, if people really want to do it, it's okay. But probably the main team is not going to. It's not going to be focused on the main team, right? And we want to have people focus on release 1. So all the hands we can. So, but it's always the chicken and egg, right? If really people want to do it, we cannot stop. They should be allowed to do so, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not saying don't do it, but if you do it with the understanding that it's not going to be an R1, it may be an R1 plus or R2. And don't get discouraged because we don't want to lose their velocity, right?
No, for sure.
Okay, I think I got it. Should I post it to you or to Slack?
In my view, you can post it to the Slack automation. It's probably good for everyone to see it, right? Not?
Yeah. I'm doing that right now.
I think it's better to put it open for everyone, right?
Yeah. I think I got it.
All right. Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You.
Appreciate it. Cheers. Bye.